out there, Dr. Miller, and I'm in little vision today. Hope you don't mind. I thought I'd give this is a presentation I gave a few weeks ago at a seminar that I hosted, and I thought I'd just talk about it here because I like talking about this topic of, I've seen this a lot in my own coaching, my own journey as a fitness professional and as somebody who trains, is what is the right program for you? What is the right program for your athletes if you're a coach? What is the right program for your people you're training? I mean, or maybe it's a combination of all these things. You don't have to be a trainer. This was made for a trainer, but I'm presenting it here as not. So if you're just training yourself and you want to know more about programming, this might be helpful. Programming is one of those things. I'm talking about programming like training programming, okay? Is one of those things that is made so complicated that many times we complicate ourselves out of an effective program. And I've done that. I did that for years when I first started coaching, and that's why I did this presentation. I don't know if anybody at the seminar found it valuable. There was a lot of really smart coaches there. They're probably like, yeah, I already do this, but maybe you'll find it valuable. So I'm going to share it with you. Hopefully you find value in it. Lots of words, valuing. And speaking of valuing, if you think this channel is worth subscribing to, please sub. I'm trying to get to 1,000. We're up to Journal Club number 35 at the time of recording this. Book review 21. I think I noted one as 19 twice. With lots of things like this, content, educational, so forth, rambles, rants, all the rest. So check it out if you have any on the channel, and again, please sub if you haven't. As far as this video goes, give it a like, but again, you're more welcome to see if you actually like it first. All right, so the appropriate program for the appropriate athlete was the name of the presentation. Purposely clunky. In my mind, I think I'm being clever, but probably not, is that, we make things more complicated than they should be, right? And so start off with what does appropriate mean? Left this in caps on, didn't cap it on purpose, so, I wasn't trying to be sloppy. But suitable or proper in circumstances. So the suitable program for the right person. So you can go the other way. Is it the right person for the program? So that was the whole idea, is the appropriate athlete, and then there's appropriate program. Do they match? Do you have a program match? Some of this might seem, well, of course, I'll get bigger, I select a program, but how many options? I mean, I encounter this all the time with people that I remote coach or just coach in person, is, which one's the best? Everybody wants the best, and that's understandable. I want the best too. But this leads to a lot of confusion. Like, is CrossFit okay? Is 5-3-1 okay? Starting strength, triphasic, manual, bi-lane, hit, 1x20, periodization, pick your model. This is just a few. How many others are just, right? The anabolic, what's the anabolic? I don't remember. There's a bunch of stuff. Okay? So a lot of options. The second thing is over-programming. And you need to be honest with yourself. I am not a Ferrari athlete. I used to be close to one, but still I really wasn't. So like most people think they're elite, even advanced elite, even like people in college are really just intermediate, right? And that, if you haven't seen my review on Glenn Penley's book, I would go look at it. He had a great definition of this, of, when is somebody a beginner and intermediate, and when somebody advanced. And basically advanced is you're trying to just squeeze every little bit out, 1% of, you got to be super complicated in your programming in order to get that 1% because the stimulus has to be so high. That's not a lot of people. If you can see changes in strength within a cycle, you're still an intermediate lifter. And I would say most people fall into that category. I'm not saying every cycle, but you can see it, then you're an intermediate lifter. I've been around athletes who are not. And they are elite athletes. And those athletes, you're living on a fine line all the time. Recovery has to be good. I mean, everything just has to be perfect. Well, that's a big statement. You have to be more perfect. How's that? In order to see progress. So what I'm saying here is it's a common mistake to have a Ferrari program for Camry, is selecting University of Division I and using it in a junior high kids, right? Or a junior high kid selecting Division of or buying some big program you don't need, or over programming, right? I'm still probably guilty of that at times. The downside of over programming, one, for the coach, is a lot more work for the same output, and for the person is it seems overwhelming. The program seems needlessly overwhelming. And sometimes I worry, even in my remote coaching, I still do that. I'm just being honest, and I'm trying to make things simpler, keep them as simple as possible. And if you're an athlete, I think remote coaching is harder when it comes to programming because you're not there. Because a lot of elite programming involves, we'll see later, autoregulation. All right, and then finally, what I went through was paralysis by information. Just so much stuff, like examples of sports, the Soviet sports literature, great literature, fantastic things of the super training and all these other wonderful research. I tell a story. I told the story in the presentation. By the way, this might be a 2-part video. We'll see. I actually sat on a plane from Utah to Connecticut, okay? and read one page of super training. One page. Just sat there and stared at it like, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I still feel like that was a long time, right? Even for somebody not as intelligent as I am. So it's a heavy book. I think it's like putting protein powder in a Guinness, right? I mean, it's a meal. It's huge. Now you have to remember though, who was the author of this book was Yuri Verkhoshansky and Mel Siff, and then there was a falling out and so forth, but I won't go into that. But bottom line is you had two mad scientists, and really the maddest of scientists, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but a man who was pushing sports science into new areas, and Yuri Verkhoshansky. And he coached elite athletes. So reading his book and then trying to I got this, I remember trying to apply this to an athlete I was coaching at the time who was a good athlete. He was a borderline high performance athlete in bobsled and good guy, great athlete, but he wasn't Sergey Bubka, right? And so I had to really, I kept over programming what he was doing. I was making it way more complicated. Technology, right? How much data can we get now from a wearable? It's crazy. I think technology is great, by the way. I don't have a problem with it. I have a push band I'm staring at right now. Okay. I think it's fantastic. I'm trying to get a Nintendo unit. I like velocity-based training. I think it's highly effective. But we can get to the point where we lock up, and there's so many apps and so many things that provide data to us about our recovery, and we can just get bogged down by all this data, and sometimes we don't trust our eyeballs. I value the research literature. I think it's great. But sometimes you can just know how you feel, right? When you've been working hard for the last few weeks and that you're getting a little more fatigued. I mean, the lifting will tell you that. That if you work hard and you take a week off. I mean, I did this in high school. Let me give an example. So I was just, even dumber back then. And I would bench twice a week, and my bench got stale and stagnated, and I would get frustrated, and I want my bench to go up, and I would get sick every once in a while, and I'd have to take a week off, or I'd be really upset, man, I'm going to suck in the weight room, right? And I'd come back after that week off and smash PRs. Now, I was too dumb back then to be like, I took a week off and I smashed PRs, right? I mean, super compensation I didn't understand that. I just go back to smashing again. I was like, I got lucky, I mean, physiology is just big lucky. This is a big lucky endeavor. And so that was kind of the, my first kind of run-in with not really paying attention to the things right in front of me. I could have wore a wearable that would tell me all these things about it, but if I just pay attention to how I'm feeling, I mean, joint pain and aches and pains are a great metric of you're starting to get overreached. I didn't say overtrained, but overreached. Well, maybe you should back off for a week. I mean, if the lifts stall out, maybe you're just tired. Take a deload week. So anyway, I'm not knocking the technology. I'm just saying that in terms of data, it can be overwhelming at times. This was an example of my paralysis. This is just a really horrible spreadsheet. But I was charting and tracking everything. There's nothing wrong with tracking things. Don't get me wrong. But I had gotten to the point, and this is really ugly, by the way. This is just my tracking of I was trying to just control everything to the point where I'd lost touch with the fundamentals. Okay? So it's easy to get to that point. You can see this is 2009, where I'm just locking up, okay? And so I had to kind of go through this. All right, so here, I'm sorry, this didn't look good when I presented it. I don't know why I put it in yellow, but this is my contention. Complexity is misplaced many times, and we end up in the major and the minor syndrome. So, we focus so much on, and my videos, I love these things, sets and rep schemes and all those. I think they're all very valuable, but remember, sometimes we don't need them, or we don't need the most complex one. Okay, like a mile rep scheme is really helpful for those that are busy, and you just need to blast in, right? But it doesn't have to be done by everybody. Pyramiding, all these different forms of pyramiding, valuable, but it doesn't have to be done by everybody. People can get stronger by 3x10 when they're first starting out, for example. Okay, sometimes we can get so obsessed with these minute details that we miss the big stuff. So I use examples here like supplements versus diet, right? Just get a better diet. You won't need to have supplements. Elaborate rep schemes versus progressive overload, right? Just make sure you're putting more weight on the bar every single week. That's the goal, isn't it? Sometimes the elaborate rep schemes are really helpful. Like I mentioned this before, and I need to do a video on this, maybe standalone videos. Some of these schemes are just helpful because of engagement, right? So you just engaged with the activity. So even by changing the weights on a wave, that's exciting, right? you're not going to get the same stimulus for 5 sets, right? It's going to be a different stimulus. And you might, even in hypertrophy training, I would like to start doing this for my remote coaching. It's just harder to program because the sheet gets overwhelming. Is wave training and I do wave training with that, but I mean wave training a little bit bigger, like make it even more of a volume shift. And it has nothing to do with some fancy configuration of volume. It has everything to do with staying engaged with the program. So being excited about going to the gym and training. And then the last one, complicated med ball balance drill versus weight drill. Like get somebody on there and doing something overly complicated that requires an inordinate amount of mobility, stability. Let's just lift weights. Let's do a dumbbell front squat. You get the same thing out of it. Okay, down here is this ugly yellow is the test. Why am I doing this? That should be the question. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing these elaborate rep schemes? Well, I'm trying to get stronger. Okay. Are you getting stronger? No. Okay. Maybe it's not right. You just need to have more overload. Maybe you don't have enough volume with the intensity. Maybe it's something a little simpler, right? It's not as I don't need another complicated, right, thing. Okay. So here is some ideas then. Well, how do you if you're trying to learn how to do things, so you're going to see the cycle that I made. If you're trying to get better at something, okay, how do you get better at it? Well, you can go through experience. It'll take you a long time to learn how to get better at it. Or you can find people who know more than you, right? This is where I got to. I was kind of leading myself, and then my mentorship came through authors and other coaches, that I ran into. But mostly, I'll be honest with you, some more of authors and other. I didn't have any coaches around me that I felt like would be good mentors. So I just learned through YouTube and books and so forth. But this is an example of this kind of wisdom. I will tell you everything. You maybe have heard this quote if you know anything about weightlifting. I know this. I messed this up in this. It's just weightlifting, not waiting. I will tell you everything you know about weightlifting in 15 minutes, but it'll take you 15 years to figure out what I told you. This is from a coach named Joe Mills. I've quoted this before, right? This tells you that the complexity and the simplicity run together. So I can tell you what you need to know in the simplicity of it right now, but it'll take you a long time to figure out what I told you. Okay? Why not just talk to a coach or know somebody who can help you? So get coaching if you need it, right, is what I'm getting at with this. You could use experience is yours or borrowed. So the glory of a young man is in their strength, gray hair, the splendor of their old. This is Proverbs 20:29. Find gray hairs. Find gray hairs to teach you and to get you caught on these. So if it's like, well, I'm majoring in the minors and I'm not getting anywhere, well, maybe I should ask somebody who knows what they're doing. And this could come through programming. You might purchase a program by a well-established coach. Now, you still have to make sure you're not majoring in the minors. You have to fit the program to the person. And that could be you. Okay, so I hope that makes sense as we're going through here. All right, so one of the most impactful books I read was Practical Programming by Ripito. This is the newer one. There was an older version of it, and it's still pretty old now. I know there's opinions about Ripito. I'm not a pro anybody or against anybody. I don't care. I'm going to be honest with you. I just want to learn. Okay, and what Ripito did in this book, though, for me, is I was kind of getting bogged down and everything, and he just made it simple. Put more weight on the bar. You can follow basic percentages if you want to at first. Whatever. Keep it simple. Programming doesn't have to be complex. I mean, I love the Charles Poliquin book. I mentioned this in the presentation as well. It's a wonderful book on sets and reps. I remember I got that book. I just was like, wow, this is a great book. I love this book. And those are great sets and rep schemes. But for the majority of people, you don't really need them. Not really. At least not out of the chute, right? Occam's razor, and you can spell Occam a little bit different reason, but Occam's razor says that the obvious answer is the right one. Okay, so the simplest explanation is likely correct. So let me give you an example here. Lifting heavier weights builds muscle strength. Therefore, lift heavier weights to get strong. Therefore, if the weights are now no longer heavy, increase the load, add weight to get stronger. I mean, bring down the complexity into the simple. So in my coaching journey, and I've plotted this later in the presentation, I got really complex. So, if this is your own personal thing, you're trying to find the most complex thing, like, oh, what's this cool program that does this, that, and the other thing? Don't lose sight of the simplicity that we're trying to chase, that I found in Ripito's book, and that Occam's razor, right, just loosely applied, describes, is whatever's the obvious answer is probably the right way to go. Do that first, right? And so I used to make fun of these principles, okay? And the reason is because I thought they were simple. I remember I took a class and I was like, these are dumb. Specificity, progression, overload, adaptation, recovery, reversibility. Who cares, right? I mean, like, I'm going to be a strength coach and I'm going to write these fancy programs and these are the dumbest. This is too simple. They're actually where I returned finally. So I went out in the weeds. I got arrogant, did the prodigal coach knowledge thing, and then came back and realized, right, I was wrong. That this is where I needed to sit. Progressive overload. I combine some of these terms. I even simpler. So instead of progression overload, I combine it. Progressive overload, which is most people talk about progressive overload. I realize I didn't invent the term. Okay. Specificity. Train what you think you can train. Recovery. Are you recovering between sessions, or is it optimal? And then reversibility. Are you training enough? You're looking at training residues. It's training. How long does conditioning last? How long does lifting last? Strength last. Right. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Make sure there's a progressive overload. Make sure you're working towards a goal, like whether it's, if you need to get stronger legs, then you need to do things that make your legs stronger. And there needs to be, if strength is the key, then that case, load is king. Reps are not. If you want to get bigger, reps are king. Keep that simple. Are you increasing the volume over time? Yes or no? Okay. You want to throw in some fancy rep schemes in there as you do that? Fine. But are you moving on these simple principles? And that's where I would get bogged down as a coach. So this is my own little figure here. So this is me starting out, uneducated, little experience. This could be as somebody training. Okay, there's nothing. I was here. Everybody starts here. If you could put me here in like auto repair, like same thing. Okay, uneducated, little experience, and then but it was simple, right? I'll put another slide up to help explain. And then I got educated, and I got some exposure to coaching and training, and then I was educated and experienced. Notice I went back to simple though. So I went from simple to complex. And I'll show you why in a second. And then as I got more educated, I realized I actually went back to the simple again. Okay, so I went through this cycle. And this is what it could look like in actual training. So 3 sets of 10 to failure. Do I do it again? I mean, I don't know, right? I'm inexperienced, right? I'm just learning how to do this. Let me slide down a little bit. This is the circle of my programming. I'm feeling out of control. Like, I don't know what to program. I know a lot of coaches see me and it's like, what do I do? Like, I don't know, like, how do I get these athletes stronger? And it's like, how did you get stronger? You lifted heavier weights today than you did yesterday. I mean, that's a little even too simplistic, but week to week, you're lifting heavier weights. How are you doing that? Maybe I just add more weights. It's the same reps, or lower the reps and add more weights, right? It's that simple. So as I got more complex though, I started, this is just an example of more complexity. I'm going to do percentage based, 3x8, 2 minute rest, 5% jumps weekly, a lot more control. I want to feel in control, but as a result, I'm getting more complex. Now, this also can happen naturally as part of an athlete. They might get effectiveness here. That's great. And then they might need more guided complexity with percentages and so forth. Like, there's no use to using percentages early on though, because they're getting strong so fast, their max will change every week. But after a while, maybe this complexity is valuable. It probably won't, if somebody keeps training for a while and they're motivated, this won't last very long though. Because what you need to get to is what I did as a coach, and then you could run through this as an athlete or as an individual. Then you do 3x5, 3x10. The whole idea is variety, right? 2 to fail, RPE. Now I can use how I feel, the auto-regulated approach. I'm coaching out of control, not meaning I don't have control of what's going on. I'm just putting more control in the athlete's hands. I'm putting more control in the individual's hands. Okay? Now, when I do remote coaching, I go over here already with somebody starting out, and I'll let them choose the loads. Now, some of that has to do with the medium. So, I'm not there. So I have to let them choose. I can't force them into loads. I don't want to do that. And that just gives them the permission to adjust the load, but that also builds some autonomy for that individual long term. Okay. With the percentage-based stuff, it's harder to do when you're not there, because that will require some adjusting and some maturity to say, like, my max changed today because I didn't sleep last night, right? Or I didn't eat before I trained. And so now my 75% of max is really my 80, 82.5%. And right, percentages has its limits. I like percentage. I think it's helpful when somebody's not as simple as. So again, this is my coaching journey. This could be an athlete transitioning journey. You can look at this in many different ways, but this is kind of this arc that I've seen of simplicity and complexity. And what ends up back is simplicity in programming. So the athlete is doing, I use example of one of the Russian weightlifters, I won't say which one, but yes, they're on drugs and so forth. But her program was just, this is how many sets, right? Here's the RP. There you go, right? How many reps you get? Well, until it's not that RP anymore, right? If it's an 8 and you hit 2 reps, then that's an 8, right? At that load, period, right? There's not much guidance. In other words, it's all auto-regulated. It could be just 5x2 and an 8, right? It's all, power lifters do this all the time with RP, right? There's more freedom in it. It's not as complex, okay? So again, you could look at like a ramp program, a 3x8, 3x10, 3x12. 4x8, so on. And then a periodized model. Okay, now I need something more fancy because the person's getting more complex. The program has to meet complexity. Okay, the fancier, the more experienced the athlete, the more complicated the program. But, and an odd sort of twist here, the more complex the athlete gets up towards intermediate to advanced, now you're going to use more auto-regulation techniques. So there's this kind of this arc that I've experienced in my own coaching. I'm over here now as a coach. Okay, but in individuals, I have to know where they are in this arc. So some people are here, some people are here, some people are down here. Okay, and I told you already, there's some crossover here. I might use some audio-regulated approaches with people just starting, but the program is still a ramp. It's nothing super complex. Keep it simple as long as you can keep it simple. Okay, so there's some other different ways of thinking about complexity. Is the older or younger, this could be biological age or training age. I'm thinking more training age here, but the more the younger somebody is, the more you spend more time coaching. Okay, so the younger they are, both biologically and maybe even training age, you're going to spend more time on technique and teach them. Their program can be simple, really simple. Train in advance, right? Somebody who's more of a trained individual, and they're going to need a more complicated program. So they still have some coaching on the floor, but this is going to slide over to be more of a complicated program. Just kind of rehashing what I said already is the more complicated the athlete, the more complicated the program. Okay, I love exercise progressions. I think this is in the research literature, like hypertrophy. Changing exercise is really important. There's a progression here. Don't start over here. Okay, if they're not ready for it. You don't start over here if you're not ready for it. I say they, meaning if you're coaching somebody. There's no reason to do a full unconventional deadlift if an DB-RDL do the same thing in terms of building posterior chain strength and size, or both. Why go to something more challenging and more technical when you don't have to? Do a leg extension before you do a Bulgarian split squat. If you're an athlete, do a leg extension. I used to be anti-leg extension, like anti-machine, and that was short-sighted. Okay? Machines are just, the older I get, the more I realize, the more I've been doing this, everything's just a tool they use at the right time. So if somebody can get something out of leg extension without beating them up and beating their spine up and doing anything complicated yet, that's it. Some people need to do leg extension first because if they're overweight, don't go to a Bulgarian split squat because it'll just tear your knees up. Not because necessarily the exercise is bad, but because you're just not strong enough to stabilize in the positions. That makes it hard on your body. So do something that's simple to start. Then move to complex as you become more advanced. This is a simple progression that you could overlay with a ramp program. So you're not really changing your sets and rep schemes, you're just changing the exercises. And this alone will be much more difficult. Greater range of motion, right? More load, okay? More muscle involvement, more complicated stability positions, right? There's a progression to exercises as well, okay? And finally, again, just trying to shoot for the middle is sometimes difficult if you're a coach. And this was just a study that I highlighted a couple journal clubs ago. It's just this one saying, hey, everybody's initial training volume was different. This was the training volume from the study. So you can imagine this individual here is going to be deloaded and not see much progress. This person down here is going to see significant progress in terms of hypertrophy. And then they actually made the training load specific to the person. Here's specificity in action, right? And so this ensures, right, when we start, that we're starting with the same volume. Now, like this is a team though, this is probably what you're going to do. You're going to shoot for the middle. As a coach or as somebody who's training, then if you're following a program and you're not noticing gains, it could be that you were this person and this is the new volume. So now you need to adjust your volume in the program. If you're the coach and you can do this, if there's like a smaller team, you see this person is not seeing any performance gains, you need to do more, right? You can individualize that program from there, okay? It's easier to do in smaller groups, but you get more specific results, okay? If you shoot from the middle, you're going to get more generalized results. You're going to lose some people that don't see progress. You're going to see people that see significant gains, okay? So those are just some things to consider as well as you're evaluating a program. If you're not seeing gains, it could be that the program is just below the volume or the strength that you were doing. And so you can't expect to see progress when you don't have any stimulus that is going to promote. Remember, progressive overload. Back to the simple principles. Specificity, progressive overload. If this guy is no longer seeing a progressive overload in volume, he will not, or this was a he will not see any more gains in skeletal muscle size. Period. Okay, well, at least minimal. How's that? I won't say any. That's a pretty big statement. This person is likely to see significant gains because of the change in volume. Potentially injury risk higher, but they will see gains if they survive, right? This is this person does leg extension. They're going to see some really nice gains to their quads in terms of muscle size. So I hope that makes sense. probably, I think I went through this way too fast when I presented it, and maybe I'm doing that again, but probably just because this is kind of a topic that's close to my heart, near and dear to my heart. And so if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll address them. I think this is an interesting topic. Over-programming or over-selecting a program that is more than is needed for the individual is an issue. I see this many times, jumping from program to program, and the reality may be that the program that you were using was a fine program. It even had a progressive overload, but the overload started too low for you. Okay? I see people do like small off and small off junior. That type of training is too much for many people. They're not ready for that. That's too big of a jump, right? Even though it's like, well, they should promote gains. True, but it's also going to promote injury, because if there's a sweet spot there on progressive overload. You go too fast, you can get hurt. Not saying you will, but over time you can get hurt. If you go too low, then you don't see any gains as a recovery and comes into place. Now, this sounds very complicated when I'm describing it, but it's not. This is where I go back to the practical programming book. If you're doing 3 sets of 8 and you're not seeing any improvements, try something different. Try 3 sets of 10. Okay, I'm not getting bigger. Okay, do 4 sets of 8, for example. Okay, I'm not getting any stronger. Okay, do 4 sets of 6. Just lift heavier stuff. It can be really that simple. And then just pay attention. If you're a coach, pay attention. My athletes are not getting stronger. Why is that? They're tired when they come in the weight room. Okay, they're not recovering well. That's one of the principles. All right, can I make them recover? Yes. Now their training's better, therefore they get stronger. It's not, okay, I got to do this, this complicated wave program. And again, I like that stuff a lot. And I'll probably release another video in a couple weeks on it. I enjoy that a lot. But you have to sit back and say, do I have everything else in order? Is there a progressive overload in my program? Then I can put this wave training program, because if anything, I found it really engaging. Yes, there's a neuro response, but if anything, I just really enjoy the wave training. I got excited about hitting those heavier loads. So that was neurological in that respect, is my motivation to train was high. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. Now you can make your decision if you like it or not. Thanks for hanging in there with me. And again, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll answer them. See you all in the next video.